The first step to avoiding an eviction is running a comprehensive application on every tenant. We recommend running a full credit report with score, nationwide eviction and criminal checks, income history, current and past 2 years' employment, and residency history for the last 2 years. Not only does this produce a summary picture of each adult tenant regarding their financial and rental history, it also helps in showing that you comply with fair housing laws. In other words, you base your results, say, on their application results and not the colour of their skin, religion, or some other protected class. So once you have approved tenants with good results, your chances of facing an eviction are greatly reduced. However, there are some other things that you can do that will help. So the next step is having a rock-solid lease agreement. We are talking about a good quality lease written by a landlord attorney. Preferably that attorney would also be the same firm that can handle any evictions that you may have. The attorney's office will be able to interpret their own lease very easily and therefore make the eviction process much simpler. Unfortunately, sometimes when it seems that our best efforts at finding a suitable tenant have been successful, there comes along a tenant that lets us know that we are not infallible. And let's face it, some areas or communities do have much higher rates of eviction than others. Another one of our policies is to make rent due on the 1st of each month and late after the 1st. On the 4th, we apply a higher late fee, and by the end of the first week, if the tenant still has not paid, a 3-day notice is personally served at their doorstep. In Florida, this notice is the first step before filing for eviction proceedings. If we are able to set up a reasonable payment plan with the tenant, then we can work with them. If not, within a short time frame and still no payment from the tenant, or worse, no contact from the tenant, we collect all the documents ready for the eviction attorney. These include the lease, an original copy of the 3-day notice, a breakdown of the charges on that 3-day notice, and any other paperwork the attorney requires in order to send the filing to court. In a successful, uncontested eviction, the proceedings usually take approximately 3 to 4 weeks for the judge to make a final judgment ruling. An uncontested eviction is one where the tenant does not make any valid legal claim to the judge of why they have not been paying their rent. Most evictions tend to be uncontested because the landlord tends to treat eviction as the final straw after giving the tenant a reasonable time to pay, and therefore the tenant usually doesn't bother fighting it. So once the judge makes a final judgment, you can then choose to pay the county sheriff a fee to serve what's called a writ of possession. We always recommend doing the writ because this is the only way to ensure the tenant is forced off the property and finalise the eviction process for sure. The sheriff will give you a time and day to meet you at that property. You have to be there early with your locksmith and perhaps a handyman to give you some estimates for repairs. You need a locksmith present in case the tenant has changed the locks, as you will need to enter the unit for the sheriff to look inside and determine if the property is vacant. Or they will need to remove those tenants by force. Your handyman will also be useful just in case you need to remove large items of the tenant's property from the house. If the tenant does leave personal items or furniture inside, you need to remove all of those items and sit them out on the curb. Our attorneys advise you against taking any of them. However, the legal requirement is that the property just needs to be out on the curb before anyone removes it. We also suggest taking photos of these belongings sitting on the curb as proof that you did this correctly, according to Florida law. You do not need to immediately remove the belongings, but to help prevent an evicted tenant breaking in to retrieve their personal property, it is a good idea to do this as quickly as possible. Then rekey all the locks and make sure all the windows and entryways are completely secure. Eviction is never a great outcome, other than the fact that you just removed a bad tenant. There are many costs, not only the attorney's fees and prior lost rent, but now you have a vacancy to fill. Plus, we have found that there are always repairs and cleaning needed. In addition to that, you now have the cost of releasing the unit all over again. So make sure, next time when you are screening applicants, be as thorough as possible and do not be forced into leasing to a tenant that you are not comfortable with. Nothing is totally foolproof, but this sure helps a great deal. The best landlords and property managers understand the blessing of a good tenant, just as much as they understand the nightmare of a poor one. And it is always better to wait a little bit longer for a good tenant and a vacant unit than to place a nightmare in that unit. Please check us out on the web at www.wemanageorlando.com for more useful landlord tips, property management advice, and help for your Orlando rental homes.